For more on the tone that has dominated the healthcare debate, let's turn to Melissa Harris-Lacewell, Associate Professor of Politics and African American Studies at Princeton University. Good evening, Melissa.
Hi, nice to see you tonight.
Melissa, we are today 8 years after the 9/11 attacks to the day when this nation pulled together to support its president in the midst of a crisis. How did we reach the point in the interim where a congressman felt free to heckle the president, to call him a liar in the middle of an address to this nation?
Well, you know, a little incivility is not necessarily a bad thing, which is to say, I know that there are many Democrats, many liberals, many progressives who wished that someone had stood up when Colin Powell was making his claim to the UN, had stood up when Bush was making claims linking 9/11 to Iraq, and said, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, that's dishonest. Maybe not in the way that this congressman did, but it's not necessarily always a bad thing to have critique. In fact, I think part of what makes America great is our local flavor, our criticism. In fact, you know, one of the fastest moving, internet clips was when Barney Frank called a woman at a healthcare reform debate a dining room table earlier. And people really thought that was great, that he was sort of showing a little spine, a little fire the Democrats had not seemed to show in August. On the other hand, I think that what has generally governed in the context of, for example, a president addressing a joint session is that you give respect and time to listen, and then you can make your rebuttals afterwards. So it was an inappropriate action.
You know, I started off in the work world as a substitute teacher, but I would hate to be a substitute teacher in South Carolina the day after our congressman heckled the president. Is there a teachable moment here, and whose lesson do you think it is to teach?
Yeah, well, you know, it's always a teachable moment, actually. My daughter is 8. Is 7, but I was pregnant with her 8 years ago when 9/11 happened. And so this morning I was talking to her about 9/11. I was talking to her about what September 11th meant and why it mattered to our country and how I felt on that day and how I felt about having her. So every moment in our nation is a teachable one. You know, I developed a kind of saying with my friends during the context of the election, and we would say, keep it Obama. And what keep it Obama meant for us was, you know, when things look like they're really kind of falling apart, when you lose your faith that the American process can work, you know, we can, whether you agree with Barack Obama politically or not, one thing you have to respect about him is that he's very even. He doesn't simply see his opponents as someone or something to get past. He actually takes people at their word. He listens to criticism. And so if it's a teachable moment, it is that in this moment, we don't want to be like the congressman from South Carolina. We want to try to keep it Obama. And part of keeping it Obama means listening to the folks who we fundamentally disagree with.
We all remember it was a central part of Barack Obama's campaign for president to change the tone in Washington. He's still trying to change that tone, as he was with his speech Wednesday night. He's doing his part, including immediately accepting the apology, the half-hearted apology that Congressman Wilson offered his staff. But do you see any hope that Washington is willing to follow Barack Obama's lead and, as you put it, keep it Obama?
Well, you know, I am truly an optimist on these questions, but I suppose I also think that things move very slowly. You know, part of the impact and the quality of the civil rights movement in the South in the late 1950s and early 1960s was its civility. And, you know, as people who were nonviolent protesters demonstrated their civility, it wasn't as though segregationists stood up and clapped and applauded and said, good job being civil. In fact, they pushed back, they brought violence, they brought anger, but it was that decision to stay in a place of nonviolent direct action which ultimately changed the course of our nation. But it did take time. So, you know, do I believe that we can be our highest ideals as a nation? Of course I do. Do I think we are performing that right now? Of course not.
Melissa Harris-Lacewell of Princeton University, thank you for sharing your perspective with us tonight.